Hey, 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 good morning, West Coast. Good afternoon, East Coast. Good evening, Europe. And I guess good night, Australia. But seriously, if you're in Australia and you're watching this right now, I got to give you some love. Thanks a lot for staying up late. I'm really excited because today I have my very good friend, Eric Quanstrom, CMO of KiteDesk, who is going to talk about something he knows a lot about, and that's lead generation and effective lead generation. My name is Mikita Mikado. I'm the CEO of PandaDoc, and I want to give it to Eric. Hi, Eric. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Makita, great to be here today. Looking forward to having this discussion.
Fantastic. So the topic we're going to talk about is Yeah, reaching out to the same leads, misaligned messaging to the accounts that sales wants to target, marketing wants to target, and then like what comes out of it is endless meetings, losses in productivity, and then like sometimes even drama, and that's super costly. That is super costly to any company. So yeah, that is a huge problem. And we at PandaDoc try to solve it at the bottom of the funnel with content and proposals, contracts, and so on and so forth. But at the top of the funnel, we've had that problem. We've seen it, and we experienced it ourselves. So very familiar with
that. Without a doubt. So, this is all a way of framing up and talking about kind of like how we really hit the subject hard today around effective lead generation techniques, because frankly, a lot of companies are realizing that there must be a third way, a third path, a better way to get to what our dictionary definition at the start of this webinar talked about, a better way to the production of business opportunities. And I'm going to suggest that better third path starts with smarter engagement, right? And so what does smarter engagement mean? Smarter engagement really means that a vendor supplier, such as either of our companies, KiteDesk or PandaDoc, would begin with the end in mind, right? So begin with the idea that marketing and sales are serving essentially the logos and the customers at those companies that we want to win. So everything that we do should be account-based, right? Along those same lines, what that also suggests is that everything that we do should be targeted. And what that means is that the trade-off that we make is we're actually sacrificing volume. We're actually sacrificing, in a real scenario, the kinds of numbers and vanity metrics in many respects that we've become accustomed to seeing, or that we've become accustomed to wearing and owning and putting forward as if, we're doing our jobs. It also means that we have to, by very nature of being smart, be multi-channel out of the box, right? Because that's where all of our targeted accounts live. They live on many different channels at once. And it's not just one. It's not just one marketing mix activity that we can rely on for all of our success. It also means that we should probably begin to think long and hard about ways of semi-automating processes that can be done essentially better than recreating the wheel every single time, right? That we have a sense of what every buyer might go through when working with our company, and we build that into our process. We build that into our marketing and sales process, right? So that we can better serve our would-be customers. And that it also means smarter engagement means that we should be thinking in terms of sequences, flows, or cadenced approach. A way to reverse this thinking would be to say, what does your buyer's journey look like? And how might I map, especially from initial awareness and introduction through to successful closed-won deals and customer support and advocacy behind that, how might I turn that into a sequence of events that I could orchestrate, that I can control, that I can tweak and optimize and continually test, but ultimately that I have a perspective on how people would want to do business with my company and replicate that out across my entire workforce, or at least my entire revenue workforce, marketing and sales. So really what we're talking about here, Makita, is blending inbound and outbound techniques together.
That's really cool, Eric. That's really cool. So, yeah, how do you do it?
Well, let's jump into the meat of the matter. So, and this is something that I think is worth thinking about, because there's always two sides to every trade, right? So there's the buy side and the sell side. The buy side you hear people talk endlessly about the leverage that buyers now have, right? The sales has changed forever because your customers are smarter, and that is true. And marketing has changed because your customers are everywhere, and that is true. But here's some other things that I think buyers demand. And think about ourselves, put ourselves in a buyer's perspective for just one moment, and the last purchases that we made, especially if we're in a B2B kind of scenario, like the last purchase your company made on a product or service or software, you demand personal experience even without you knowing it, right? You demand to not be treated like a number because you'll take your business elsewhere. The other thing buyers like are culture driven towards is consensus purchase, especially in a business-to-business environment. Consensus purchase nowadays, table stakes. It's the rule. It is not an exception. I've yet to meet the unilateral decision maker that, that takes no input from anybody else, that literally makes the decision solely on their own to buy anything anymore these days. Makita, do you ever do any of that? Because I'd love to know.
I do not remember a software product that I purchased on my own. It just doesn't happen anymore. You always got someone who evaluates, or it's always a group decision. It is always a group decision.
And that group is diverse, right? And so consensus purchase has its own dynamics with regards to how do I align? Anytime your product or service is going to touch different parts of a company or input is requested from those parts of the company in a B2B sale, we have to consider that people are coming to the table with wildly diverse backgrounds. It's like saying, you know, can you get on the same page with 5 other people that will immediately like go right into their perspective or their camp for how they see anything, especially how they see a purchase in light of the company's needs going forward. And then the third thing in this kind of like upside down triangle is that insights intelligence and really the ability to use Google and monitor the web and find my own information that I can draw, you know, whether I trust, whether I don't, whether I think it's credible, whether I don't, that's table stakes. And if you don't think that every time that, you know, you're on the sell side, that you're not being researched silently in the background, you're sadly mistaken. That's the way people buy nowadays. So how people sell is also changing. And again, back to the question you asked, how do we do this? How do we get smarter about sales engagement? Let me give it to you in a narrative fashion. Ultimately, on the sell side, what we're looking to do at the very top of the funnel is produce predictable pipeline, right? So again, we had talked earlier about de-risking our business. We had talked about being able to essentially forecast effectively. Well, what if I suggested that targeting the right people at the right companies with the right contact information to communicate on the right channel with the right approach in the right order would produce a qualified meeting? And again, qualified stems right from the idea that you're talking to the people that you want to be talking to. You're not wasting your time with people you don't. So that work goes in at the very, very top of the funnel to where I'm stressing essentially a rethink for a lot of businesses for how they manage themselves. So let's actually look at that funnel and kind of take a sneak peek of how we might break that down, right? So if all of a sudden, rather than working on islands separately, marketing and sales were sharing the same funnel, here's some activities that you might suggest are interlocking or interleaving from both sides of the fence, right? So starting with this account-based notion of who do we target, moving through the top right portion of how then do we advertise to them? How then do we create brand awareness amongst that target population, right? How do we put messages and create familiarity for those people as I'm targeting them? And furthermore, as they begin to be exposed to my brand, so they may even come inbound, right? So how I can recognize that those same people that I want to be talking to, those same logos that I want to win, ultimately should be able to come to my front door as well, right? No different than using a lot of the inbound principles that, we kind of alluded to earlier, but in a slightly different perspective, such that we know when people are coming to us from a persona and contact perspective, we already have an understanding of their role, their title, their needs, their goals, their wants, what they are looking to achieve, right? We can begin to think about that and put that into our marketing and sales approach as we move about. And then we have to think about, okay, as a sell-side supplier vendor, how do we route leads effectively, right? How do we place leads into the position to best be followed up with in a sequenced and managed fashion? And by the way, notice where I put content. Content sits now in the middle of the funnel as opposed to at the very top, right? Because we're not just creating content for anyone. We're creating content that's going to further our sales process. We're going to help the people that we want to help and become educators so that they can make wise buying decisions, right? So content sits squarely in the middle of this funnel and is shared between marketing and sales, both from a lack of waste, right? The marketing team's not just out there creating clickbait that maybe gets the wrong kind of people to our website, but the website traffic goes up and we all feel really good about ourselves. No, we're producing content that actually attracts the right personas that can be used by those people to facilitate a purchase or to facilitate them getting smarter about your own areas of promise as a vendor supplier. And so then we move through, kind of the listing and the working of those leads at this point. Now we're really talking about the production of business opportunities. And that happens across multiple channels. So again, I'm talking about email, I'm talking about phone, I'm talking about social, and maybe even offline, right? So custom steps in our own processes, such that we can get to the process then of a more familiar, qualification piece of what those, and I'll take a step back for a second. We at KiteDesk actually use a qualification method called NOTE that's very buyer focused. It stands for essentially need as the first thing that you have to qualify for, opportunity, team, and effect. So a bunch of those pieces are essentially, long story short, if you don't have a need, then we're not a good fit to talk right now. If there's no opportunity to be had here, then our conversation will be very short. If we don't understand who's affected from a team perspective, who's in this consensus buy with you together, then we're moving very shallowly through a deal, and that deal will never close. And then ultimately, the reason that we're talking is because we're talking to produce an intended effect, the E portion of NOTE, and get people into a qualified state where they're as aware of why we're here at this progression phase, and they're moving with us, alongside us in parallel, towards essentially a closed-won deal or a problem solved that has a great effect on their business, solving real business problems, as opposed to just buying a product. And then we move from that opportunity state to a closed-won. This is the new sales funnel as far as I'm concerned, with marketing and sales sharing a similar perspective. So let's break down this funnel and get into the various pieces. But does this construct, as you're thinking about changing your own business, Nikita, is this making sense?
That makes so much sense. And one more thing I would add to it is when you go after targeted accounts and after a specific demographic that simplifies your operations. And as the CEO of a software company, I can tell that helps to build a much better product because you know much better who you're building this product for, and that makes your life so much easier and helps to create stickier and just better software. So I'm with you on this, and that's the funnel we're working on and looking forward to launch. internally within PandaDoc.
I love it. And, what a perfect segue to get to this place of some ideas worth considering, especially for everyone in the audience, around account-based marketing, targeting, and then really defining it and beginning to speak the lingua franca of your personas and contacts throughout your revenue organization. The right targets really matter, right? So if you think about the aspects of where we identify waste and the challenges that I presented at the very start of this webinar around lead generation being the hardest thing that everybody struggles with, sales and marketing alike, and they talk about this on surveys all the time. The ideal customer profile and who you actually are targeting as a business sets the cascade of events to follow, right? If you get that piece wrong, if you're not targeting the right industries or the right company sizes in the right areas with the right kind of like either trigger events that would lead them to your product or service, or even, because we're both technology firms, the right tech stack, what you'll find is that even in closed won opportunities, you've wasted a lot of time throughout the rest of the process, right? Because there's always going to be a number of human interventions. And as we all know, human salaries are the most costly expenses in every company, right? So the more people that are touching potentially bad fit clients or potentially just wrong fits overall, the more expensive it is, even when you win. It's easy to identify where you're wasting time and identifying the wrong fits when you lose. But frankly, a lot of people don't spend the time saying, okay, well, what if I win this client? And then I'm sunk, or then I'm stalled, or then I've wasted a lot of my team's my team's time, money, and resources. So getting really crisped up on the firmographics and demographics of the right targets for your organization is a huge, huge, huge advantage going forward. And so, I thought I'd put together a quick list of some of the tools in the space that will help you along this journey, right? So I think that there's a lot of folks out there who maybe are familiar with some of these brands, but maybe have worked off of, purchase lead lists or, cobbled together lists on their own. There's a lot of great services out there that will take this process and make it more accurate, will save you tons of time, will have really good information that you can slice and dice and really hone in on right out of the gate. And so I put a number of logos there for the audience to kind of take back and say, okay, these are tools that I could put on my short list and evaluate going forward. So as we move through the rest of the funnel, let's also take a look at some of the other tips associated with this kind of top of the funnel perspective. From a sales development perspective, some of the averages that you can expect around the sales development function, again, your mileage may vary within a given organization, but what we know to be true from Bridge Group and other survey research is that an SDR typically averages about 21 meetings set per month. Of those 21, about 62% of those turn into opportunities, right? So again, the production of business opportunities is where we started this lead generation discussion. And if I take kind of a 23 or 25% opportunity to close ratio, what you should expect from that opportunity creation standpoint is largely three closed won deals per month. So it's one way to think about getting averages in your company and beginning to look at some of the metrics behind the madness that I'm suggesting. It also goes hand in glove with how you might quota and how you might set up your sales team and your sales development team to work hand in glove with marketing based around the kinds of numbers that you would want to hit, right? So average sales quota at the low end for SaaS-based account executive would probably be around $750,000 $705,000 in ARR. The highest I've seen is probably about 1.5 million. But again, depending on your business, your average contract value, that number changes pretty dramatically. I've used the $20,000 average contract value here in order to hit that quota. So you should always be like kind of taking these numbers and massaging them and figuring out like, okay, how do I want to set up my staff and how do I want to coordinate my organization to ultimately hit the revenue numbers that I need to hit? So my advice or my tip is to reverse engineer your volumes that are appropriate to your business from quotas in order to kind of move your way back up the top of this funnel from a hiring as well as a quota perspective. Does that make sense? So
makes
moving
absolute
on.
sense. And actually, those are the numbers we're holding ourselves accountable to on the outbound front.
That's awesome, and we didn't even talk about that beforehand. Another thing worth considering as we kind of move our way through our mythical new funnel. So getting focused with ad spend, this is really going out to all the marketers out there that have been spending money and laying chips across the roulette table rather indiscriminately for a long time, in the sense that, hey, I'm going to have my demographic slicing and I'm going to pay for display, or I'm going to pay for, retargeting, or I'm going to pay for presence across a very wide swath. And what I would suggest is, as you move towards a more sales-centric or more sales engagement-centric world with an account-based mindset, one of the things worth considering is really getting focused with your ad spend. Thinking about the ability to provide for your sales development and sales team air cover. So what does that mean? It means essentially creating targeted brand awareness and messaging exposure in a population that your sales team will be working and approaching anyways, right? Without getting too long-winded on the concept, the behavioral psychology concept of familiarity, familiarity is a core component to trust and liking. Put another way, the more times I see your message and your brand, the more familiar it becomes and the more predisposed I am to liking and trusting it. It's that simple. And so,
Eric, what have you? Sorry to interrupt. What have you seen in numbers? What does air cover do to the numbers of meetings and opportunities that sales reps are capable of booking?
Well, this is an interesting question, because a lot of this is still in its infancy, and tracking. Let's get real for a second. A lot of ads today, and I think I'll indict an entire industry, and that's the display industry and the banner ads that you see across every website every time you're on the web. The click-through rates on those are abysmal. They're probably the lowest things that you'll ever see, but click rate is a horrible indicator of any interest or involvement with the brand. How often do you click on banner ads to go down into somebody's funnel, Nikita, on a yearly basis?
Never.
And you're very similar to, statistically speaking, everyone else who uses the web. However, you can recall banner ads when you've seen them over and over and over again, right?
Yep.
And it registers in your mind, in your subconscious. It's one of the reasons that retargeting has been one of the hottest areas of ad spend for the last decade, last 7 years, since retargeting became kind of a big thing. So the idea and the concept is not new. Creating familiarity, measuring it is an entirely different story. So ultimately, what you should be looking for is essentially what the marketing people might refer to as assisted conversions, and what sales and sales development teams might think of as improved conversion rates, right? There's a massive difference between some calling into an account and having the person on the other end of the line having picked up and say, oh, you're so-and-so from Acme. I've seen Acme all over the place lately, right? That familiarity caused an entirely different dynamic right off the bat than if they'd never seen, heard, or were familiar with Acme ever before. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I so want to add air cover ads on top of our SDR effort and kind of like see what it does to the number of opportunities and the quality of those opportunities that our SDR team books. Yeah, that would be definitely an interesting discovery.
Yeah, and so without belaboring this point, I think we all get the idea that marrying up our ad strategy, which marketing usually controls and kind of operates on, arguably in a silo around, with our sales strategy is generally a good idea. And the tighter that can be and the more focused, the less wasted ad dollars we're going to have, if nothing else, and improved outcomes like we just talked about with better conversion rates, better, connect rates, better response rates from a sales perspective, which frankly, every salesperson listening to this cares more about, from their marketing team. So moving our way through the funnel, some other ideas worth considering. Here's one that I don't know if I've heard a ton of people talking about this, but what if we were to treat inbound and outbound leads equally, right? What if we were to say, essentially, now that we're on the same page and working in the same funnel and moving towards the same goals, that our inbound leads wouldn't suffer from neglect. They wouldn't be essentially abandoned. They would be treated as the same sort of gold and got on the same page, again, in this better sales engagement world. The benefits would really be around better human experience for your customers, right? Where all of a sudden, again, I never felt like a number when I'm buying from you. The response time to pick up my call and address my needs would always be met. And then on the sell side, rep productivity could explode. It could really be where we route the lead to the right rep at the right time with the right sequence. And all of a sudden, reps can become very consistent at processing leads, getting to qualification, being more consistent in their approach, hitting brand messaging right. And there's a whole host of benefits to all of that, which I suggest. But ultimately, that comes from being able to route and treat leads fairly equally in your organization. And I've provided a number of tools that will help you do that as well. So again, moving kind of through our funnel, now we're into kind of the meat, if you will, of multi-channel engagement and getting smart with our workflow. So one of the coming waves, if you will, or trends that I feel we're still in the early innings of is this notion that human beings matter. I know you don't get that from reading the press clippings of robots taking over the world and chatbots everywhere and so on and so forth. But frankly, I'm here to offer a counter argument that says that majority of people actually like dealing with other human beings. And furthermore, they respond really well to authentic human-to-human interactions. And frankly, we see this every single day in our own sales development team, where I know that the open click-through rate and reply rate is going to be far higher when I send a me to you email, like if I just wrote an email to you, Makita, than if I were to blast you as one of 5,000 in what could be the best looking marketing email ever, that you would simply ignore after looking at for less than half of a second.
That's just quite frankly, exactly. And quite frankly, one of my assistant's job is to actually unsubscribe me from all the mass emailing because I don't have time to read them.
Right. Yeah, and cutting through the clutter and breaking through I would argue that one of the few areas going forward anymore that we as vendors or sell side can get through is pursuing a human-based approach, right? Where we truly essentially have just a me to you. I've done my homework. I've researched you. I've personalized, and not in the way that I put a first name, last name, or company name tag into a batch email, but rather where I've actually spent the time to like get to know like your persona, get to know your business, and then approach it as if I'm demonstrating that I'm investing time in you and your business in order for you to give me the time on the back end, right? So every outreach becomes purposeful as much as it is targeted. And I'm reaching out to you in an informed manner rather than a shotgun, treat you like a number, dime a dozen approach that frankly won't resonate with anybody. So ultimately, I think workflow can become a competitive advantage for people when they combine efficiency and effectiveness in each engagement. And the more businesses that I see starting to look at that paradigm and that process, the more I see success. The more I see people that said, yeah, you know what? We changed around the way that we thought about going to market and the people that we served, and we actually started serving them, and results happened. And so there's a number of tools in this space that I think are well worth considering, and I've put a number of them up on the board here for those watching this to investigate, to kick the tires on, to essentially become more aware of. If you're not using these currently, I would strongly suggest, making the sales engagement investment, just because it's such a powerful tool that does unify back up the stack all of the efforts that we talked about earlier. And, last but not least, before we hit our time limit here, I thought I'd kind of combine here some averages, and I can go into this in Q&A later, because it's actually very, it's data culled from our own databases and our own customer set here at KiteDesk. But I wanted to stress the last note, and it's one of analytics. And so, you had asked a question earlier, Makita, about how do I know, or how do I watch, or how do I thread the needle here on, making decisions that aren't flying blind. And one of the things that I would suggest is that moving to an event-based tracking system, which, all of the vendors that I just presented from a multi-channel engagement or a sales engagement tools perspective do, some better than others, is this notion of I don't have to log activities. Every activity that I take as a salesperson is logged already automatically. And that analytics kind of paradigm becomes transformative. Why? Because all of a sudden you don't face the same problem that frankly plagued the CRM industry, and even to a large extent the SFA industry before that, of people not logging things becoming garbage in, garbage out, where you couldn't trust the data. One of the great things about sales engagement and the sales engagement tools today is that every action you take automatically gets written to a database somewhere and then can be looked at from an analytical perspective of what's working, what's not, where I'm spending my time versus where I should be spending my time, what sequence or flow needs to be optimized and what doesn't. And this is really the key to improving performance over time. And so with that, I know we're right at the 50-minute mark and wanted to get into kind of Q&A. And so I'm going to kind of conclude there. But this has been a real fun ride, and a pleasure for me to spend some time with the audience.
Eric, awesome content. While the audience is getting ready to ask the questions, I've got a question of my own. So we have the scenario that you described in one of your slides, where marketing is focused on inbound and paid and every other marketing traditionally marketing channel, while sales is focused on outbound demand generation. Where would you start to bridge both together and kind of like start this journey of putting the company on the account-based marketing track?
You bet. So I think that the natural place to start is right in the middle. And that middle is oftentimes the sales development team in an organization. And frankly, when I see folks that are new to or about to launch their sales development teams, this is actually a lot of the informed thinking that frankly, we're either advising them on or they're telling their stories along these lines, which is to say that sales development, are rarely revenue-carrying salespeople, right? They're quota-carrying.
Yep.
Oftentimes those quotas are qualified meetings, appointments, or demos, depending on your industry. But ultimately, the revenue is downstream from them. And so it's actually fair to think of them as much marketers as they are salespeople. And so that middle becomes the fulcrum or the leverage point for your organization to become really good at account-based marketing, sales development, and sales.
Makes a ton of sense. We have a question from the audience. How does anyone define quality leads?
Oh, what a great question. So when I think about quality as regards to leads, I think of the notion that we get to set that bar for our own businesses within our four walls. We get to determine what becomes quality and then communicate that internally and then begin to seek out that same quality, if you will, I'm doing air quotes, externally, such that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The idea that I could source and have the kinds of people at the kinds of companies that I want to do business with should be baked into your quality scoring, right? There's no one that makes the rules other than you out there running your own companies. And ultimately, I think that is really the quality bar. It becomes definitional to that organization. And if you're not spending time there defining what is a quality lead and what's not, then you're really you have to start there. You have to go back to the drawing board and get people on the same page so that everyone can speak the same language about what a quality lead is or isn't going forward.
That's great. We got a really good question. What are the next best alternatives for email marketing in the future?
Well, I've seen email marketing evolve quite a bit over the last decade and a half. And if you think about where email marketing grew up, in the advent of the internet, taking a journey, if you will, backwards through time, one of the things we figured out with email after we figured out that we could send emails from one person to another, and we invented this funny language with @ symbols and web addresses like .coms. The first wave, led by companies like, Responses or even Constant Contact or a number of firms that aren't even around anymore, like Epiphany, that were gobbled up, was this notion that, you know what? If I collected a bunch of email addresses together, I could send all of them the same message at one time. And so that idea of batching together emails gave rise to the email service provider industry. And familiar names on the space now are companies like MailChimp or ExactTarget, that literally pass billions of emails every single day and are filling your inbox with the kind of spam that Makita alluded to earlier. The second wave of email was really around, that email service component should be kind of core to my marketing activities. And that happened around the mid to late 2000s, where we saw the rise of folks like Eloqua and Marketo and HubSpot and Acton, who combined email with a number of other marketing activities, as well as the ability to target down and pull from a database of people that I would want to do multiple email sequences or nurture campaigns with in that same sort of batch and blast mentality. I think we're at a third wave now where we've realized that kind of what I was alluding to earlier, that personalized email, the me to you email, is the most effective form of communication when using that medium. And how do we get into a semi-automated fashion where we can be super authentic and personalized and purposeful in our messaging, while at the same time not lose some of the benefits of, if I have to write the same email template over and over and over again, I'm wasting a lot of my time, right? So I think that the third wave is really around what some have called email automation, and I keep referring to as sales engagement. And so that's where I think email is evolving too.
Yep, absolutely. And then we get all these new channels like social media and things like LinkedIn or Twitter. Those are all helpful. And as you start doing account-based marketing, I'd imagine ads, account-targeted ads is going to be another medium. I was even getting, mailing packages coming into the office with the postcards and books and all kinds of things that are used as one of the mediums on top of personalized email messages. So it sounds like once you get into this like account-based database, let's call it that way, there's so many mediums which marketing and sales can utilize in order to reach the audience, right?
Absolutely. And offline is nothing new. I will say the caveat there is offline is the ultimate epitome of the skepticism that you expressed earlier of like, how do we track it? How do we measure it? How do we ultimately ascribe value to time spent doing any of these tasks or activities? And ultimately, the ends are always going to justify the means. If you win an account and, you can look back across all the activities that contributed to that close one deal. Where you place that attribution is it's an art as much as it is a science. And I think it's probably one of the most fundamentally hard problems to solve in today's day and age. And frankly, we could probably do another hour-long podcast on attribution, inclusive of offline channels and offline activities.
Absolutely. Speaking of time, we're actually running out of it. I want to thank you, Eric, for being with me here today and sharing your awesome experience and knowledge with the audience. We have a few more questions that we probably wouldn't be able to cover today. So would you mind sharing the best way to contact you somehow online?
You bet. So I can be found, luckily I have a last name that's not common at all. There's not that many Quanstroms in the world. So if you do a Google search for Eric Quanstrom, you can find me on Twitter at eQuanstrom or my KiteDesk address. And frankly, if you're that desperate to get a hold of me, you can hit me on LinkedIn as well.
Beautiful. Again, want to thank you for a fantastic webinar today. Thanks everyone who's been with us, especially folks in Australia. You guys are heroes. I hope to see you again at one of our future webinars when we hopefully talk about the middle of the funnel and more of the bottom of the funnel. Eric, again, thanks a lot.
You bet, Makita. My pleasure. Thanks to you.
Bye-bye.